What I'm going to do to get started is I'll just walk through setting up a field record that does not have a land agreement on it. In the past with Traction, if you did not have a land agreement on a field and you set up a field record and went back and then created that land agreement, it would not go back and pick up any records in the past that had been created. And that is something that has been changed with Traction. So if you come into Traction and you import in or manually create a bunch of field records and you're like, oh shoot, I do have a land agreement on this field, whether it's sharecrop or inputs or splits, it will actually pick up anything in the past if you want it to when you go create that land agreement. And I'm going to kind of walk through some examples with that today. So if I am in the field records section, I'm going to come in and I'm going to manually create a field record. We're going to work in our 2025 crop year for this example. So when I come up in the upper right-hand corner and I select new record, we'll just do a seeding record, for example. I am going to come down to this Melinda North field here. I can leave all that information. Oh, wait, let me make sure. Yep, I'm in 25. Okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick my seed that I'm going to plant in this field. I'll just say we'll do 36,000. So you can see over here, I do not have an agreement with this field at all because if I did, there's going to be a landowner's agreement and it would say the number of seeds or bags to the right that they are in charge of if there is a crop share. Going to select next. Going to save and close this field record. So I have this Melinda's right here. Right here, Melinda's North. Here's that seeding record. Say I'm like, oh shoot, there is a land agreement on this field. I need to go in, I need to create that. So if I come down to this land agreement section over on the left-hand side, you can see here for my 2025 year, I have my land agreements. I do not have an agreement for that Melinda North field. So I'm going to make that. In the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to select this new agreement button. I'm going to pick the field or fields that agreement is with. So I already have one for Melinda's All. I'm going to select this Melinda North and select apply. My farm is the leasee. And you'll see now in Traction, we actually base those land agreements off of crop year. So for this example, we are still working in 25. Each year within Traction, you can kind of move those land agreements forward. Say that there isn't a land agreement for a specific year, you don't necessarily have to move that forward, or you can move them all at one point, and I can kind of show you how that works. There is also a new feature in the upper right-hand corner that has this fill button. So say that there was already an agreement that I wanted to copy from either the prior year or from a different agreement, I can do that. So that Melinda's All land agreement that I already have saved for 2025, if I wanted to copy that, I could select that and I can select save. And what it's going to do is it's automatically going to fill in the agreement from the other land agreement that I had picked. So for this example, we have a 50-50 split. If I needed to change that, I could do that in here. The landowner does get 100% of their 50% of the crop when harvested. And then they also are in charge of all of the 50% of inputs that they have within Traction. If I'm going to bill them directly out of Traction, this is where I'm going to want to toggle on this bill landowner, because then in the invoicing section, this will give you the ability to actually pull in any field records that would be on this specific field. If this is not something that you wanted to have automatically filled in, like say from a prior agreement, this is where you can just come in and select this click to add landowners, and then come in and manually fill in any of that additional information that maybe would have not have already automatically filled in. So if I come in here, I enter, again, my 50-50 split. I'm going to toggle on this bill landowner. Here you can put in the cash rent information if you choose to. A lot of times with onboarding and setup, if you are just paying cash rent within Traction, you're not necessarily having crop share, input share, or any of that. It's not necessary to actually put in a land agreement, just because whenever you cut the check for cash rent, that is where you can allocate that check to the specific fields. So if you are just paying cash rent and you don't have any crop share at all, I usually recommend not actually creating the land agreement just because this part doesn't necessarily really go too far because you are going to be allocating the check directly. So once I come in here, I kind of fill out that information for that land agreement. I'm going to select save. I don't have any landowners because I'm the other 50% on this agreement. I'm going to select save here. This is the new part of Traction where it's going to say, okay, there is already one field record out there, which was the seeding record that I just had. Or do I want to create the land agreement and change that field record? And here is where I'm going to say yes, because I want it to go back and I want it to go pick up that seeding record and basically say that that landowner is responsible for 50% of the seed that I just planted on that field. If I wanted to see to make sure that that actually worked, if I come back to that field record section, I'm going to refresh this just in case. I'm going to come back to that field record section. I'm going to come down to that seeding record here. You can see down either whether I hit edit or see in this screen now, you can see that there is a landowner's quantity where they're responsible for half of the bags essentially that win on that field.
Taryn, I think we might have had a question here from
Sure.
Sean.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Good morning. So a question, positing a hypothetical, how does your system handle contingency payments? So let me explain what I mean. A lot of our leases, they're based off of a gross share. In other words, we harvest the whole field, find out what the yield is. An agreement says the landowner gets 25% of the yield, or they get a cash minimum flat per acre of $150, something like that. How would this system handle an agreement like that?
Mm. Brian, do you
Yeah,
have?
we're just not set up to handle something quite like that.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so you'd
Mostly
have
it
to,
focuses on crop shares and flat cash, one or the other, but not both.
you can do both, but it's not going to do the calculation for you in
Okay.
that particular situation. So like with Taryn, with these new land agreements and the changes that you can do with them, she can go back and change the land agreement and adjust it, and it will go back and adjust the field record for her, which is kind of nice. We couldn't
Mhm.
do that in the past. So at least you can make some edits to those land agreements and have those impact the field record side of it. So at least the numbers are all working out in terms of inventory. But it's not going to know whether you hit a certain threshold to actually cut the check, the additional money for whatever you're giving that landlord, you know.
Right.
It's not going to do that for you.
So really that calculation would need to take place outside of the system.
Yeah,
Then
you
the
would.
calculated rent would need to be input into the system and then it could take it from there.
Yeah, yeah, and that is a really interesting request, and we've heard this from some other farmers too. So it's something that we're aware of. I'd say that would probably
I
want
would
to
say
have
the
a deeper
majority of
conversation
our
with
leases.
you and to learn a little more about that because we are always looking to make updates in the
Yeah.
software and to improve it. So
Yeah, I'm open to conversation on that
yeah,
outside of here, anytime that y'all would want. I would say the vast majority of our contracts are exactly that. There's some kind of share on the yield with a cash minimum, or they're just flat cash per acre.
gotcha.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I'll
Any
make a
other
note of that.
questions? I'm kind of setting those up. Sorry, Brian.
No, I'll make a note. Part of the webinars and the reason why we enjoy them so much is just hearing your voice and hearing some feedback and things that we can keep improving the software. So, appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, if there isn't any other questions, I'll kind of keep chugging along. I'll kind of show because there is this new land agreement feature within Traction. We'll kind of show how those, because those land agreements are now based on year to year, There is this option down in the bottom right-hand corner under the land agreements section where it's that you can either copy all to the next year. So say I wanted all of these agreements, it's going to be the same for the next year. I wanted to move them over. I can do this copy all to next year button. Also, you'll notice that if you come into your crop years and you assign those your crops to the specific fields, let me get in there real fast. I'm going to go back to 25. I'm going to select that Melinda farm. Oh, I already have it assigned. Let me see if I can do it for 26. Yeah, okay. So if I were to toggle this on and I come in and I assign that crop, you'll see here it says one crop zones created, one land agreements copied. So what it'll do is because I came in and I assigned that crop to this specific field, it is going to come in and move that agreement to the next year. So if I come in here and I save this, you'll see one land agreement copied to crop year 26. So if I come back down to my land agreement section and I change my crop year to 2026, it's already moved those land agreements over. So if I don't really necessarily need to come in and copy the prior year's agreements to this crop year, the 26 year, it will copy that agreement over whenever you assign your crops to that field. Say that's not correct, say that land agreement is not there anymore. Obviously, you can come into this land agreement section and delete that land agreement if that's no longer an agreement within your attraction or whatever you have. So those are kind of some new things. Like I said, probably the biggest thing is whenever creating those land agreements now, it will go back and pick up any field records. Say that you've created field records within Traction. It will go back and pick up anything that has been posted prior to creating the agreement, whereas before it did not. So there was a lot of manual having to recreate field records and if the land agreement was put in too late. And then obviously moving those field record or those agreements from one year to another. The same is going to go obviously for if you do have a crop share with any of these records. I'll just show an example because I put in that 50-50 split. If I come in and I create a load for that specific crop year, we'll pick that Melinda North. And we'll just say we're taking it. Actually, I'm going to change this. I'm going to go another way. Sorry, guys. I'm going to create the field record within here. Save a harvest record that comes in for that specific field. I'm going to select this Melinda North. Say that I am only harvesting 50 acres. You'll see here that landowner's quantity, it's already calculating it because it does have 50%. I am going to create the load and put it in a specific storage bin. And you'll see again, it's going to take out that landowner's quantity based off of my agreement and store my 4,500 bushels. And I'm going to save and close. And you'll see that whenever we run a field profit center report, you'll kind of see that split here in just a second. If I want to see all of that information that basically I have the records coming through on the field that does have the land agreement. If I come in here and I come into either the field ops section or the accounting section and run a field profit center, I can select my field detailed. I'm going to select, I think I already have, go down to this Melinda's all. I'll do both. So you'll see here, it's going to show the farmer shares only. There is an option to run the landowner share only or both. So because I have a 50-50 split, if I want to run it for all of them, it's going to double everything. So here you can see this was applied on the field. This came through the monitor. Say I have an integration with Ops Center Climate Field View. This is what came through there. If I just wanted to run it based off of the landowner, I can fix that report and it is going to split that out. And you can print this report if that's something that you wanted to provide to whether you have agreement with the landowner or for yourself. So this is super helpful just to kind of see and kind of confirm also that that land agreement is working because if you do have a crop share, it'll split that out based off of whatever you put into there. The last part I'll hop over to is the invoicing portion, kind of invoicing any of those records that I have a land agreement with. Any questions about kind of setting up those land agreements before I kind of hop over there for the last part?
Yeah, Taryn, I think we did have a question here from Tom. He said, "Can one field have multiple land agreements?" Then he goes on, "For operational efficiency, oftentimes we combine adjoining land masses into a single field."
Only you, I think you can only have one agreement on one specific field. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it'll override it. Let me double check.
I was going to say, go ahead and try it, but I think
Yeah, because
you're
I
right.
already have an agreement on this field, it won't let me create a new one. Yeah, so you'd have to just manually, either you could remove the prior agreement if you needed a new one, but it won't let you put multiple different agreements on one specific field.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, Tom. I don't know if we ever had that request before to have multiple land agreements for one field.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that before either.
Another question, does land agreements include crop insurance split to reflect the actual crop insurance split also?
It does not. So you would have to, whenever you could, I mean, if say we had a crop insurance check and you wanted to allocate half of it to the field to kind of reflect that, you could do that. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, because if you say you are in the check and you want to allocate that expense to that field, it would reflect in the field profit report, but it's only going to show the full amount. So say I just had $1,000 allocated to the field. It's when I run that field profit report, if I allocate the full 1,000, that's what it's going to show. And say that the landowner was in charge of 50% of that, it's still going to show the $1,000. It won't know to split it like by $500, if
I
that makes
think
sense.
you're I think you're right, Taryn, on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd have to, yeah, kind of have to split that out. And in that case, you essentially like could, yeah, if in the transaction, if you just wanted to allocate half of it, you could just do half of it on the line, um, or and create it as a separate line if you needed to.
I was
To
going to say you probably could do that in the payment
Mhm.
and purchase window.
Mhm.
You could just add two rows and
Mhm.
do half and half, and then
Yep.
for that one half, just allocate it to that if that's
Yeah.
what you want to do. That would be a workaround for the moment. I wish it was more automated than that.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll take a note of that one, Craig. But at the moment, you just add the exact same, like she's doing rent expense land. You add two of those there, but you only allocate the half to
Mhm.
that field.
Mhm. Yeah. All good questions.
Yeah, good stuff.
Awesome. Any other questions?
We had another question from Ken.
Yep.
Um, we have one entity custom farming, another entity in traction, and have a land agreement set up. Can an invoice be shown and paid on the landlord payer side of the invoice?
So you would have to create that's the hard part. If you have the two entities set up in Traction, and again, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, you would create the invoice within Traction to invoice one entity to the other, but you would also have to create the bill, like if you wanted it to reflect on the entity that essentially has to pay for the invoice, you would have to create the bill for that amount to reflect it. You can't, in Traction, you can't necessarily like, if you create an invoice for one entity, it won't, if you were to hop in the other entity, it won't create that bill automatically. You would have to go in and manually create it to show, like, okay, the invoice is there, but the other entity that is in charge of having to pay for it, it won't automatically create it. You'd have to manually create the bill to show that, to reflect that amount that has to be paid. if that answers your question, I think.
Yeah, maybe kind of go through the invoice tool. Maybe that's a good place to start for everyone.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yep. So part of the invoicing feature within Traction, because I have that bill landowner toggled on, say any of those records that I have on that with that agreement that has that bill landowner toggled on here. If I come over to my invoices section, I'm going to create that new invoice for that landowner. So Melinda is my landowner here for this example. I can come in, I can automatically fill out any of the information regarding that invoice that I'm creating. Because I have that bill landowner button toggled on for that landowner, you will see in the upper left-hand corner there is this bill landowner option. If you do not have that toggled on, that little button is not going to appear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this bill landowner option. I'm going to change my crop year to 2025. And so these are all the agreements that I have with that specific landowner. So you'll see here that this is that field that we created that seating record for. And these are already records that I had already had come through that I need to invoice her for. If I needed to adjust the input costs that say I wanted to upcharge them a little bit, I could put that number in here. But for this example, I'm just going to bill her directly. If I did have equipment on any of those records and I wanted to invoice them for that, I could toggle this on. And then obviously if I had field records that I had already previously billed for, if I wanted to see those, I could toggle this on and have those appear in here. But for this example, we're just going to invoice her directly for all of those records for both of those fields that we have agreements on. I'm going to select apply, and it's going to pull in all of those inputs that were applied on that field for me to invoice her directly. If I needed to come in and adjust any of those prices, I could come in and bill those directly to her. But obviously this is everything, half of what was applied to her field because it's going to record 100%. This is half of what she is responsible for to pay me. I'm going to select next, and this is what that invoice is going to look like. Once I select save and close, then it's going to record that invoice to Melinda. If I had Melinda set up as a separate entity for that example for like custom farming, so say Melinda was a separate entity that I had set up in Traction, it won't come into her and it won't record that invoice even though it was invoiced to her. You would have to come in and manually create the bill for that specific amount, kind of for that example, if you wanted to record that as basically a liability to pay over on that other entity that you're invoicing to. Does that kind of answer your question, Ken?
Yeah, Ken had a comment here. Doesn't invoice and bill both reduce the inputs that are used if the bill is itemized?
Yeah, so like if you have that 50-50 split, so only 50%, like half of the inputs are going to be removed in one entity. If you were to create the bill and remove that inventory again, it is going to pull it out. So like if you're in the other entity and you create the bill to pull out half of that inventory, it will pull it out again essentially. So you may be pulling out too much inventory, if that makes sense. So in that case, you'd want to create the bill for just the whole total amount. Just because on the operation side of Traction, it's literally just looking at just one operation as a whole.
Yeah, you might have to kind of tweak that a bit, maybe just use seed expense or chemical expense and not the inputs.
Yep, on the bills feature. Yeah, if you are in the other entity. Good question.
Yeah, so we had another question from Craig going back to I think that crop insurance example where we were talking about like crop insurance expense and only allocating 50% to that specific field or
Mhm.
half of that field. Um, so the question here is, does the register match my bank statements? So if we split crop insurance, it would sync up with accounting. So the answer would be yes,
Mhm.
for sure on that.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, because it's just gonna post whatever payment or deposit came through.
Yep.
Uh, and if you needed to split that or invoice the other half, then you could do that by creating the bill or the invoice.
Yeah. So the reason I ask about crop insurance is when one shares 50/50 or 33/66%, for example, that is a sign-up process at the FSA office. And then it automatically splits payments to the farmer and landlord for premium and claims, etc. That is for sure all large producers in the USA. Okay. Yes, we can handle that. Good questions. I figured there's just so many unique situations with land agreements. So there's just I don't know, that tool tries to be as flexible as possible to accommodate lots and lots of different scenarios.
Awesome. Any other questions or anything else that anybody would like kind of like to take a look at or go back over?
I have not seen anything through chat.
Awesome. Yeah, the only other thing that I just thought of off the top of my head whenever creating those agreements, a lot of times when I'm working with customers setting those agreements up, we'll just pick a field, for example. Just see it's free here. A lot of times whenever landowners are coming in and putting in those agreements, they'll try, you'll see, you can't probably see down here, but down in the bottom right, it'll have the total acres of the field. A lot of times customers will try to like calculate the acres if it's based off a certain percentage. If you just put in that percent over here, so like we'll just say it's a 14.5%. Like for this example, it will calculate the acres for you. So you don't have to manually come in and calculate what those specific acres are for that field. If you just put in that certain percentage, it will automatically calculate the number of acres for you based off of that field acreage that you selected.
Thought it was kind of interesting there. I don't know, maybe I learned something new today, but on that screen right there, Taryn, so that landowner area. So
Mhm.
if I had one landowner for that field, I saw that
Mhm.
you put 50% there instead of
Mhm.
100%. I
Mhm.
always put 100% there in that example. And
Mhm.
then on the right-hand side, I would put in like the 50%,
Mm.
for the inputs and then the 50% for
Sure.
the harvest share. So
Mm.
you just did the opposite of what I do, but in the
Yep.
end, you were doing the exact same thing. The numbers
Yep.
were all working out the same. So
Yep.
um,
Yeah. And that's just
it's a
one
different
thing.
way,
Yeah.
different way of looking at it. Yeah,
Yeah. It'll still calculate it all the same way, but yeah, just make sure. Yeah. So if it was a 50-50 split, if I wanted to do like 50 here, which is what Brian was talking
that's
about, you could
that's
do
how
that.
I would do it. But that's not the way you did. It's not wrong. It's just a
Yeah.
different way of looking at it from that angle.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Sean, I think we had a question.
Sure.
Yes, sir. So implicit within all the land agreements is obviously a time frame by which the landlord expects to be paid. Say you just got a simple straight cash lease, you pay the landlord $150 an acre and they expect to be paid by December 1st.
Mhm.
What does the system do to track and to manage the schedule of those payments?
I mean, you could go in and you could create, it doesn't really project it. And again, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't, even if you were to come in here and you were to put in that agreement for these numbers, it's not going to really project it out. You would have to come in and you would have to create like a bill in the one entity and say, okay, like create a payable if you wanted to. Um, Essentially, the only time it would reflect, like capture that payment on that specific field is once you receive the check or cut the check, if you wanted to allocate that expense or revenue to a specific field.
Okay, so it's pure data tracking and
Hmm.
record keeping for the profitability.
Hmm. Yeah, like from an accrual basis, yeah, you would just like if you wanted to track that and know that that check is coming where you have to pay that check, you would either create a bill or an invoice. It won't, yeah, if you put in that information in here, it won't project that out, if that makes sense, or pick up on any reports that this is due or you're receiving it for that specific field.
Got it.
Yeah, you're right on, Taryn. I mean, that's exactly how I would do it is to set up bills for each of those landowners and put a bill in for cash rent expense and track it through the bill area. But yeah, that area of traction isn't really tied to what you're seeing right here at the moment.
Mhm.
That's something that I'm just going to write a few things down here for today, but that would be kind of cool on that screen there to be able to perhaps do something a little more automated for you and then remind you about that too. So good suggestion. One more question from Tom here. So cash rent per acre agreement, acres don't match actual field acres. What is the best way to handle that?
Um, that's a great question. Like if you needed to adjust the acreage on a field within traction, you could always do that, like on the farms and fields, so that it does reflect that. But it's going to, like, once you cut a check and you allocate it to that specific field, it's only going to pull the number of acres based off of the field that is set up. You wouldn't be able to like adjust like the acres on that specific check that you're allocating to, if that
Yeah,
makes.
the only thing I can think of, Taryn, is if you are recording a payment for cash rent expense,
Mhm.
you could you got the notes area where you could put the different acres on there as a notation. Um, but you're right, everything is kind of tied to that field acres in terms of field records and how the land agreement's working. But the cash rent transaction piece of it, you could just add a notation about the different acres if it was different.
Mhm.
Might be the best way to handle that. Yep. Yeah, had that request. We had another request here, a really good one about some sort of notification when payables are coming due. So
Mhm.
Um, we do have some feature requests for that one. So if any of you others that would like that as well, let me know and I'll make sure to tag your name to
Mhm.
that feature request that we have set up in Traction. Okay.
Great questions.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, I think you're doing it right on your end. Any other questions? Yeah, good. Good. I really like this. Definitely not a quiet crowd today. And I kind of figured that. So this topic here can go a lot of different directions. So I assume we're going to get a lot of questions. Okay, I know we're past time here. Appreciate you all hanging in there. Just think of any other questions, go ahead and put those in chat. But I just have one more slide here. So we have a few other webinars for April before we roll out some other webinars for May. A really good one next week. So Taryn did talk a little bit about field records. She did a really quick one today for a seeding record and a harvest record. We'll get into how all those kind of play into the integration side if you got John Deere or Climate and how that kind of auto populates your field records. I believe we got Barbara Boyd. A lot of you know Barbara. She's going to be stepping in and helping out with that webinar next week. So that should be a really great one for next week. We're looking forward to that. And then after that, we've got accounts payable, field profit center analysis to wrap up the month. So all these are up on our website that you can sign up for. And if you sign up, you'll get the recordings for them as well. Uh, and let us know if there's any other topics that interest you. Anything regarding webinars, would love to hear that. Okay, I think Ken had another feature request here. It'd be nice to have an invoice from one entity show up as a bill for the other entity. I agree with that one. Yep,
I also agree.
yep. We'll look into that one. Good. I appreciate it. Good comments, good suggestions for, improving the product as we move forward. So Uh, yeah, we will hopefully hear you all join back with, next week with the John Deere and climate discussion. So we'll see you again. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.